Hello everyone, today I want to tell you about a recent court case which is also quite topical, seeing as how it involves a junior doctor and they're all on strike at the moment, and this is purely coincidental that this case involves a junior doctor who just reported in the courts in the last few days. So what is it all about? Well, it's about expenses incurred by the doc so that he could do his job. And unfortunately for him, HMRC denied those expenses, saying you can't have tax relief for them. Principally, they were around accommodation. So let's dive straight into the detail. So this guy and his family lived in Southampton, but he had a job at a hospital in London. And basically, the deal was that he was required to be on call 2 nights a week. On call and be within half an hour of the hospital. He had to be within 30 minutes of the hospital twice a week. So, this guy didn't want to uproot his family from Southampton, the wife and the kids. He said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just rent a flat pretty close to Guy's Hospital, or wherever it was in London. And he rented this flat and he put it through on his tax return as a tax deduction. In the employment section, this guy was an employee of the NHS Trust, whoever it was at the London NHS Trust, employee on his tax return employment section, where it talks about expenses, other expenses, he put this in. HMRC said, no, you cannot. Why did they say you cannot have that as a deduction? Well, to get a deduction for expenses incurred as an employee is a lot higher benchmark to prove than if you are self-employed. Principally, if you're self-employed, the expense has to be wholly unnecessary for the purpose of your trade. If you're an employee, wholly exclusively and necessary. So let me just repeat that. Self-employed, wholly and exclusively for your business. If you're an employee, the same too, plus necessary. Has to be necessary. So this thing went to the courts and they tested it and they said, look, what does necessary mean? And the first tier tribunal, interestingly enough, looked at this and they said, you know what? Well, yeah, he's got to be within 30 minutes of the hospital. It's part of his job. It's the requirement. And he does a bit of work from the flat. He doesn't get a lot of personal benefit from the flat because all his family life's down here in Southampton. So you know what? We're going to give him a little bit of relief. They gave him what's called a partial deduction. They said some of that expenditure you can have against your taxes. HMRC appealed and said that's absolute baloney. Went to the Upper Tribunal, the next court in the pecking order. And the Upper Tribunal agreed with HMRC that the first tier tribunal had got it wrong. More specifically, they had erred on the point of law. And basically, the Upper Tribunal, is where we're at now, they said, look, there is nothing in this guy's employment contract with the NHS that says he has to incur that expenditure to rent that apartment. Yes, he's got to be within 30 minutes, but that's his bloody problem how he does it. Not, there's nothing in his contract which says it's necessary that he's got to incur this expenditure. It's not part of his the employment obligation. He's not obliged to have a separate accommodation other than he's obliged to be within 30 minutes on call twice a week. So there's a big difference. So basically, they denied him the full relief. They said the lower courts had erred, got it wrong basically, and this guy was not allowed a deduction. So, what else do I need to tell you about this? So, this is the difference in expenditure. Expenditure to put you in a position to do your job is not tax deductible, but expenditure in the performance of your duties is. So if you're doing something in the performance of your duties and you're obliged to do it, that is tax deductible if you've incurred the expenditure. But just to put you in a position to do your job, that's not tax deductible. So this guy, because they sort of gave the example, they said, look, what about other junior doctors who do live within this corridor here. They're not, they're not claiming tax relief in any of this. They just happen to be living in a certain place. There's no requirement. Yes, he's got to be within 30 minutes, but that's up to him. It's his decision not to move his social life, his family, to uproot them from Southampton and move them to London. He chose to leave them there and incur this expenditure, and that was deemed to be not part and parcel of his job. So, what do you think about that? You may think, well, hang on, yeah, it is kind of... No, listen. The law says this, 2 strands. If it just to put you in a position to do your job, which is what the upper tribunal said that situation was, forget it. Expenditure in the actual performance of your duties, yes, but it was deemed in this case that was not in the performance of duties. So, just an overview there, which I thought I'd talk about, seeing how it is very topical in a junior doctor related court case. So there you go. So if you like this video, please do subscribe, and as always, I'll see you soon.